Ever feel like you're just staring at this mountain of information and trying to find that one really crucial insight feels, well, impossible.
Yeah.
Like trying to spot one specific grain of sand on a, enormous beach.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's the heart of the curse of dimensionality. It's a tricky problem with really big, complex data sets.
The curse of dimensionality, right?
Basically, yeah. As you keep adding more and more types of information, the whole data space gets emptier. It makes it harder to spot actual patterns or differences.
Emptier. How so?
Well, think like this.
Yeah.
One piece of info. Easy. Two, a bit more complex. But add dozens, hundreds, thousands. Connections just get super diluted, hard to make sense of.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Well, today on the deep dive, we're actually tackling this head on.
Good.
We're diving into some really interesting research on tools that cut through that data overload, specifically feature selection.
Ah, yes. The art of finding the important bits.
Exactly. Finding the important nuggets in that sea of data. And we'll look at how combining genetic algorithms, which sound fascinating, with the power of cloud computing can really boost this.
That's a powerful combo.
Our guide for this is the publication Feature Selection and Cloud-Based Parallel Genetic Algorithms by Dino Keco, Zerina Masetic, and Jasmin Kevric.
Right. That paper gets to the core of a really major hurdle in data analysis today. Because, in so many data sets, a lot of the info we collect is either redundant.
Like telling you the same thing twice?
Pretty much, yeah.
Like?
Or it's just irrelevant. Doesn't actually help you understand the main patterns or predict things accurately. Feature selection is about smartly picking out and keeping the stuff that really matters.
Okay, so for you, the learner, listening right now, think about it. Whether you're wading through research papers, making sense of market data for a presentation, or just curious, mastering this is like finding a shortcut. It's about seeing the essential signals through all the noise, right? Getting to those aha moments without drowning in data. And to help us connect the dots on the tech side and why it matters, we've got our expert here.
Happy to be here. So our mission today really is to unpack how this mix, feature selection, genetic algorithms, cloud computing, lets us sift through these huge data sets efficiently.
Okay.
We want to get how it helps pull out the truly significant stuff. And we'll look at some compelling examples too, like in cancer research and cybersecurity.
Sounds great. Okay, let's start at the beginning then. What exactly is feature selection?
Right. So at its core, feature selection is this process. It's about carefully choosing a smaller, more relevant bunch of features from your original bigger data set.
Features meaning?
Like the different columns in a spreadsheet, maybe the different types of measurements or characteristics you have for each data point.
Gotcha.
And the problem it solves is that, well, lots of data sets are just bloated, full of information that doesn't really help understand patterns or make good predictions. It can actually confuse the analysis.
So it's kind of like decluttering your workspace. Getting rid of the junk so you can focus on what you actually need.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah. By ditching those unnecessary features, we simplify things. And that has several big pluses.
Okay, like what?
Well, first, the machine learning models you build become easier to understand. Less complex, more transparent.
Makes sense.
Second, fewer features means models train way faster. Saves time, saves computing power.
Always good.
And maybe most importantly, it helps avoid overfitting.
Ah, overfitting. That's when the model gets too good at the training data, right? Learns all the noise and quirks.
Exactly. It aces the test data, but then fails completely on new, unseen data.
Yeah, not useful.
By cutting down features, you reduce the risk of the model just memorizing the training set instead of learning the general patterns that actually work in the real world.
Okay. Now, you said it's important to distinguish this from something called feature extraction.
Right. Good point. They sound similar, but are different. Feature selection is about removing existing features you don't need.
Okay.
Feature extraction is about creating brand new features, usually by combining or transforming the original ones. Think of like principal component analysis, PCA. It mixes original features to make fewer new artificial ones that capture most of the variance.
Got it. Selection prunes the garden. Extraction makes a new recipe from the ingredients. So finding the best set of features, that sounds like a huge puzzle itself.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
Finding the single best subset. That's a tough optimization problem.
Oh, tough.
Well, imagine just 20 features. The number of possible subsets you could make is already over 1 million.
Wow.
And I think hundreds or thousands of features, the number of combinations just explodes. It's computationally infeasible to check every single one.
Okay, so definitely not simple trial and error. We need smarter ways. The research mentions three main types of methods: filter, wrapper, and embedded.
Correct. Let's break those down. First, you have filter methods. These are usually the fastest.
Why is that?
They use statistical scores or proxies to sort of estimate how relevant a feature is without actually training a full machine learning model. Like,
Right.
how strongly does this feature correlate with the outcome we care about?
Okay, quick checks.
Exactly.
Okay.
But because they're approximations, they might not always pick the absolute best set for a specific model or task. They might miss some subtle interactions.
Okay, fast, but maybe less tailored. What's next?
Second are wrapper methods. These tend to be more accurate.
How do they work?
They actually use the machine learning model itself to evaluate different feature subsets. So for each potential subset, they train the model and test how well it performs its accuracy, for example.
Ah, so you're directly testing how useful the features are for the model.
Precisely. The subsets that lead to the best model performance are considered the winners. But the catch is, well, it's computationally expensive.
Because you're training lots of models.
Exactly. Training and evaluating potentially thousands of models for all those subsets takes a lot of time and processing power. And the paper notes, genetic algorithms often fall into this wrapper category.
Okay, more accurate but demanding. And the third type?
That's embedded methods. They try to get the best of both worlds, a balance between filter speed and wrapper accuracy.
How?
Here, feature selection happens during the model training process itself. Some algorithms, like lasso regression for instance, have built-in mechanisms that automatically assign less importance, or even zero importance, to less useful features as they learn.
So it selects features while it builds the model.
That's the idea. It avoids that separate, costly evaluation step of wrapper methods.
Interesting, a sort of integrated approach. Now, the research we're looking at really zooms in on genetic algorithms. What are they and how do they fit into feature selection?
Right, genetic algorithms are, they're pretty clever. They're inspired by biological evolution, natural selection.
Okay, Darwin goes digital.
Sort of. You start with a random population of potential solutions. In our case, each individual in the population represents a possible subset of features.
So, like, lots of different combinations of features thrown into the mix initially.
Exactly. Then you evaluate each one based on its fitness. How good is this solution at the task? For feature selection, fitness is often measured by, well, how well does a machine learning model perform using only those features?
Makes sense. The better the model performs, the fitter that feature subset is.
Precisely. And the fittest solutions, the best feature subsets, are more likely to be chosen to reproduce.
Reproduce.
Oh.
How does an algorithm reproduce?
Through processes called crossover and mutation, again, inspired by biology. Crossover takes parts from two or more fit solutions and combines them, like mixing features from good subsets to potentially make even better ones.
Okay, mixing and matching the good stuff.
And mutation introduces small random changes, maybe flips a feature from selected to not selected or vice versa. This keeps things from getting stale, helps explore new possibilities.
So it prevents getting stuck too early on just one type of solution.
Right, it maintains diversity. So you have this cycle. Evaluate fitness, select the best, reproduce with crossover and mutation, create a new generation of solutions.
And repeat.
And repeat. Over many generations, the population hopefully evolves towards better and better feature subsets, until you find one that's good enough, or you hit a predefined limit.
That's a cool concept. The paper mentions representing these subsets using binary encoding.
Yeah, that's a very common way.
Yeah.
Imagine you have 100 features total.
Okay.
A potential solution, a subset, can be a string of 100 bits, zeros, and ones. A 1 in position 50 means feature 50 is selected. A 0 means it's not.
Ah, simple on-off switch for each feature.
Exactly. Makes it really easy for the algorithm to do that crossover, swapping parts of strings, and mutation, flipping bits.
Elegant. Now, you said the fitness function is crucial. How do you define that for feature selection?
It's really the engine driving the whole thing. Typically, it involves 1, taking a feature subset, an individual. 2, training a classifier, using only those features. 3, evaluating that classifier's performance, usually its accuracy on some test data. That accuracy is a big part of the fitness score.
But maybe not the only part.
Good point. Often you also want simpler models. So the fitness function might include a penalty for selecting too many features.
Ah, so you reward subsets that are both accurate and small.
Exactly. It's a trade-off, balancing predictive power with simplicity and interpretability.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we have these genetic algorithms, often used as wrapper methods, evaluating feature subsets with machine learning models. but we hit that computational wall again.
Precisely. Training potentially thousands of models over many generations. It's a huge computational load for a single machine.
And this is where the cloud comes in.
This is exactly where distributed computing platforms, like Hadoop, become game changers.
Hadoop, we hear that name a lot with big data. What is it, fundamentally?
It's an open source framework. It lets you store and process massive data sets across clusters of, well, relatively ordinary computers linked together.
So not one supercomputer, but lots of regular ones working together.
That's the idea. You take a big complex job and break it into smaller pieces that run in parallel across many machines. The core programming model for this in Hadoop is called MapReduce.
MapReduce. Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. Think of it in roughly 3 phases: map, shuffle, and reduce. The map phase takes your input data and processes it into intermediate key-value pairs. Each map task works independently on its chunk of data.
Like workers on an assembly line, each doing their part.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
parallelizable. Then the shuffle phase automatically groups all the intermediate pairs of the same key together.
Sorting things out.
Right. And finally, the reduce phase takes each unique key and all its associated values and does some kind of aggregation or summary calculation to produce the final output. The whole thing runs across the cluster.
So instead of one machine doing everything step by step, you have many machines doing parts simultaneously.
Exactly. Massive speed up. Plus, Hadoop has its own distributed file system, HDFS, to store the data across a cluster, often near the machines that will process it. And importantly, it's designed to be fault-tolerant.
Meaning it can handle machines breaking down.
Yes. If a node in the cluster fails, Hadoop can automatically rewrite the work to other machines. For long, complex jobs like genetic algorithms, that robustness is really essential.
Okay, so the research looked at running these genetic algorithms on Hadoop using MapReduce. They mentioned 2 models, extended and compact.
Right. The extended model basically runs each generation of the genetic algorithm as a separate MapReduce job.
Okay.
So after generation 1 finishes, it writes the new population back to the distributed file system, the HDFS. The generation 2 starts, reads that population, runs, writes its results back, and so on.
Sounds like a lot of reading and writing to disk.
It can be. That input-output, the I/O, can become a bottleneck and slow things down.
So what's the compact model alternative?
The compact model tries to run all the generations within a single, much longer-running MapReduce job.
How does that help?
It dramatically cuts down on that I/O. The intermediate populations are mostly kept in the memory of the running tasks, not constantly written to disk. This usually makes it much faster overall.
Faster sounds good. Is there a downside?
Well, the paper notes it might be more prone to something called the species problem.
Species problem. Sounds biological again.
It's a term in genetic algorithms. Sometimes the population can converge too quickly on a few good enough solutions, losing diversity. It stops exploring other potentially better areas of the solution space.
Like everyone jumps on the first decent idea and misses an even better one.
Pretty much. The thinking is the compact model. By keeping things more localized in memory, might sometimes encourage this premature convergence more than the extended model.
So a trade-off again. Extended might be slower but maintain diversity better. Compact is faster but risks getting stuck too early.
That's the general idea, yes. The researchers tested these parallel implementations using the 1max problem.
1max? What's that?
It's a classic, really simple benchmark for genetic algorithms. The goal is just to evolve a binary string to be all ones. Fitness is simply the count of ones in the string.
So like a basic test track for the algorithm.
Exactly. See how fast it finds the known optimal solution and how well it scales up on the parallel system? It's a sanity check.
And how did their implementations do?
The paper reports they showed faster convergence on 1max compared to some earlier approaches, which is, a good sign that the parallel implementation itself is efficient.
Okay, promising initial tests. Now let's get to the exciting part, the real-world applications. They use GMS microarray datasets for cancer research.
Yes, this is where you really see the potential impact. The GMS database has, I think, 11 different cancer gene expression datasets.
Gene expression, so measuring how active different genes are?
Exactly. And these datasets are classic examples for feature selection because they have a huge number of features, thousands of genes being measured, but often only a relatively small number of patient samples, maybe a few hundred.
Thousands of features, few hundred samples. That sounds exactly like the curse of dimensionality we started with.
Textbook case. Makes it incredibly hard to build reliable models for, say, diagnosing cancer types or predicting outcomes without first zeroing in on the most important genes.
So how did they apply their parallel genetic algorithm here?
They combined it with machine learning classifiers specifically, artificial neural networks, ANNs, and support vector machines, SVMs.
Okay.
The process was, the genetic algorithm proposes the subset of genes. The ANN or SVM is trained using only those genes to classify the cancer types. The accuracy of that classification feeds back as the fitness score for that gene's subset in the genetic algorithm.
So the algorithm learns which gene combinations lead to accurate cancer classifiers.
Exactly. And remember that penalty for size. The fitness function also encouraged finding small sets of genes that were still highly accurate.
Right. Find the minimal, powerful set. What were the results?
Pretty stunning, actually. Across most of the 11 data sets, they achieved classification accuracies of 100%.
100%. Seriously.
Yep. And they did this using dramatically fewer genes, often around just 20.
Wait, so they went from potentially thousands of gene measurements down to about 20 key genes that could perfectly classify the cancer type in many cases?
That's what the results showed. It's a massive reduction in complexity while maintaining or even achieving perfect accuracy in those tests.
That's incredible, like finding the 20 essential ingredients out of a whole supermarket.
It is. And they use cross-validation, a standard technique, to make sure these results are reliable and not just overfitting the specific data splits they used.
So robust findings. Were there any cases it didn't hit 100%?
Yeah, they mentioned a couple. One brain tumor data set using the SVM classifier, and a larger data set with 14 different tumor types using both classifiers. But even in those cases, the accuracies were still very high.
Still impressive. And did the parallel computing part make a difference?
Oh yeah, they explicitly state that running this on their Hadoop cluster significantly cut down the execution time compared to what it would have taken on a single machine, making the whole approach much more practical.
So faster results, enabling this kind of complex analysis. The research also mentions intrusion detection systems, IDS, and NSL-KDD datasets.
Right. Briefly, but it's another important area. Intrusion detection systems watch networks for malicious activity, like cyber attacks.
Okay.
Some types, called anomaly-based IDS, use machine learning to learn what's normal network traffic and flag anything weird.
But network data must be incredibly complex, too. Lots of features.
Hugely complex. Again, a prime candidate for feature selection. You want to identify the key indicators of an attack without getting bogged down by irrelevant network noise.
So just like with the genes, finding the critical network features can lead to better, faster, more accurate cyber attack detection.
Precisely. Better accuracy, fewer false alarms. While the paper didn't detail specific NSL-KDD experiments as much as the GMS ones, it highlights the general principle. Feature selection is vital for making sense of complex data in cybersecurity too.
Wow. This has been a really fascinating look under the hood. So the big takeaway seems to be this powerful synergy, right? Combining feature selection, these smart genetic algorithms, and cloud computing. It lets us pull real meaning from incredibly complex data.
Absolutely. The cancer research results really drive that home.
And for you, the learner, it shows how these sophisticated tools can act like powerful filters, helping you zero in on what's essential without getting overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's about finding that signal in the noise intelligently. Imagine trying to read thousands of pages to find the few crucial paragraphs yourself. That's the kind of scale we're talking about.
It really does change how you think about tackling big information challenges, and it makes you wonder, if this works so well for scientific data, how else could we use it? Like analyzing social media trends, market data, even just the flood of news online. Could reducing the dimensions help us spot significant patterns we're currently missing in all that noise?
That's a really interesting thought. What new insights are hiding in plain sight, just obscured by too much data? It's definitely something to ponder.
Definitely.
And, for anyone listening who wants to dig deeper, there are tons of open source tools out there now. Libraries for machine learning, for distributed computing like Spark, which evolved from Hadoop. Lots of ways to experiment with these ideas yourself.
Great suggestion. Food for thought, and maybe some weekend projects for the curious.